Is Star Wars overrated? That is going to be our topic today, and it is also one of the many reasons I disabled comments for this Star Wars month. By the way, judging by the way these things have been going, I'm going to continue Star Wars month into next month. When I say month, I basically mean 4 videos, 1 per week. But that doesn't mean 1 video each week. It basically just means 4 videos, because, you know, there's 4 weeks in a month, right? About a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago even now, because time flies, me and a friend of mine, T Kettle, did a podcast called Is Star Wars Even Good? So there might be a lot of similar sentiment from that podcast that we did a year and a half ago in this video. If you would like, you can check that out. The link to that video is going to be in the description below. You could watch that first or come back to this. Or I haven't really rewatched that podcast in a while, so who knows? Maybe my thoughts about it have changed, but just judging from where I am and what I remember about recording that podcast is not really. I don't think my opinions have changed. Again, I could be wrong, but I'm not going to just come out and answer, is Star Wars overrated yet? Okay, I'm going to keep you guys in suspense. Overrated is an interesting word because it's a subjective thing. It's like something that's overrated can be underrated to other people. Or is it an objective thing? Because society is kind of the thing that makes something super popular. Like Ariana Grande, for example, is super popular. That's a fact. That's not even an opinion. That is a fact. She is super popular. Now, whether she's overrated or not, that's the subjective part. Because that means you either like her music or don't. And I feel like the same thing goes with Star Wars. Is Star Wars overrated? An argument could be made that yes, it is overrated. Because here's the thing. The biggest underlying question throughout this whole video is this. Does the quality of the films match the level of fandom that the Star Wars series has? I want you to think about these films objectively. If we go by majority rule, I guess the answer would be yes. But if you go by people's individual scale, the answer differs. You know, my scale, for example, of what constitutes a good Star Wars film from a bad Star Wars film is different from everybody's. And that includes all films in any franchise. Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Marvel, James Bond. You know what I'm saying? There are people who love the Sean Connery era of James Bond. They think it's the best era. There are people who love Roger Moore. I personally think Roger Moore was the more goofy side of Bond, but I do like both. But people have different perspectives upon it, you know? However, I think it's good to be able to look at a film objectively and say, this is what the majority thinks about it. This is the consensus. This is the majority opinion about this movie, because there are majority opinions. Now, a lot of people like to go after sites like Rotten Tomatoes, which is just a conglomerate of critics calculated into a score. And by the way, a lot of people view Rotten Tomatoes actually wrong. Dan Murrell has a really good video about how to actually rate movies on Rotten Tomatoes, because everyone just kind of looks at the percentage. But the difference is that the percentage is different per every movie based on how many critics reviewed it. There's a whole nother system to rating movies on Rotten Tomatoes that people don't really seem to understand. Dan Murrell, like I said, has a really good video about it. I don't know if it's still up, but if it is, I'll put that in the description as well. If we look at the consensus about Star Wars, is what I'm getting to here, is the scales are a little, they kind of tip in the favor of, yes, it's overrated. Because, all right, let's look at the facts. Star Wars is insanely popular. There are other franchises that rival it now, but back then it was revolutionary. It was the only thing like that of its kind. Okay, yes, there were Star Trek fans and other kind of fandoms out there, but nothing like Star Wars. Star Wars, it could be argued, created the fandom. It created fandom for movies and stuff like that. That's arguable, but you know, that's my point, is that you could argue that. So when you look at the films objectively, and this is not my opinion, but this is objectively, so this is what the majority of people say, you know, be it critics or people I know personally. People love the original trilogy, all right? Return of the Jedi, people say, is not as good as the first two, but people still love it because they say it's a really satisfying conclusion to the first 2 movies. But that's the only negative thing you'll ever hear someone say about Return of the Jedi. Either that or the Ewoks. They'll be like, the Ewoks were a little dumb. But like, those are nitpicks. People can overlook nitpicks when it comes to Return of the Jedi because it's part of the original trilogy. So people love those, you know what I'm saying? And the sentiment has changed about these films over time. If you go back to 80, you can see that critics were a little harsh on Empire Strikes Back. A lot of people said back then that it wasn't as good. Movies change over time. I'm gonna really dive deep into that in my next video, so I don't wanna populate the conversation with my thoughts on that subject right now. But I will say, back then, Empire Strikes Back was not as well received as A New Hope. And a lot of people don't understand that A New Hope wasn't even called A New Hope back then. It wasn't called Episode 4. It was just called Star Wars. And then it wasn't until the re-release in the 80s when those films were rebranded as Episode 4, 5, and 6. But generally speaking, now people love the original trilogy. Even with the few flaws they have about Return of the Jedi, people still love it. The prequels are interesting. I'm gonna dive deeper into it in my next video, but most people don't like the prequels. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at this objectively. Most people don't like the prequels. I only know of a couple people who actually like the prequels. Most people who like the prequels usually, in my opinion, this is why I think a lot of people like the prequels. Now, what's my opinion about the prequels? I'm gonna just be honest here, I do not like them, okay? I grew up with them too, but I think it's different for me because, I don't know, I've grown up with, you know, I've dedicated my life to the art of film, so it's like, you know, most people nowadays only go to the movie theater to see spectacle-driven films. I go to the movie theater to see every kind of film, you know? So I feel like my approach to film is different. A lot of people could say I'm a snob, but I personally don't think I'm a snob because real snobs don't like things like Marvel or Star Wars or big franchise stuff, and I love that stuff. I think every film has its place. So I personally don't think I'm a snob. I hope you guys don't think I'm a snob. But the thing is, I feel like my view of the prequels is so different because I look at that film objectively. I don't look at that film as a part, those films as, oh, well, it's part of Star Wars, so now I have to put them on this pedestal, so they're good no matter what. No. And I'm not necessarily saying that people who like the prequels do that either, but one thing I will say, and this might be a controversial thing to say, I really truly believe that the people who like the prequels only like the prequels for a couple reasons. A, nostalgia. They have big nostalgia goggles for the prequels. And B, and it kind of goes into A, is nostalgia for everything else that came out afterwards. They grew up with the prequels. They were a kid when Phantom Menace came out in 1999. And when the Phantom Menace came out in 1999, they laughed at the fart jokes. They laughed at Jar Jar Binks stumbling around. They liked the 5-minute lightsaber battle in the 2.5-hour movie about politics. Sorry, that was a little petty, I'm sorry. And they also grew up with things like the Clone Wars. So they grew up with things like the Clone Wars, they grew up playing the video games, and all that stuff kind of enhanced the prequels for them. The prequels alone, in my opinion, are very hollow movies. But then things like the Clone Wars came out, the video games came out, and added layers and depth to the prequels. I never watched the Clone Wars. I didn't play those video games. I have only seen the movies. So my judgment on the prequels is not clouded by these other properties that have, and I've heard other people say this, fans of the prequels say this, fix the prequels. I've never been exposed to those mediums. You know, I'm about halfway through season 1 of Clone Wars right now. I'm having a hard time getting into it. I hear it really hits its stride in season 3, and I'm trying to. Also, watching that show is like, in order, is like doing homework. It's like annoying. And okay, maybe that's a little too far. All I have to do is look at a list, but it's still annoying. Like, why do I have to navigate? You know what I mean? I don't understand it. I guess that's the Star Wars thing now. But my point is, I feel like people like the prequels because of that reason. Because of nostalgia. They grew up as a kid and they liked it as a kid, so they have that nostalgic bond with them. So I'm just trying to justify when I say people typically don't like the prequels. Now, you can like them, and you're entitled to like them. Like I said, I gave my reasons about why I think most people like them. Is because there's actually a term for this, by the way, and it's called phantom menacing. I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a term in the film world called phantom menacing. When someone is phantom menacing a movie, that means they're too much in denial to admit it's a bad movie because they love the property so much. And I've done it before. I did it with the second Transformers movie. I've done it with Green Lantern. I've done it with the fourth Indiana Jones movie. I did it with the theatrical cut of Justice League. You want these films to be so good because you love the property, and then you realize, oh, you know, it's actually not that good. This happens to a lot of people. But I'm getting way off track here. Point is, people love the original franchise. People objectively don't like the prequels, and objectively, they really don't like the sequels. The sequels is a whole bag that I'm not going to get into right now, but I will kind of give you just my overall kind of impressions about the sequel trilogy. I honestly think the first two sequel films are not bad. Yes, I said first two. That means I like The Last Jedi. Saying you like The Last Jedi is like dropping like a huge bomb in a conversation. Like, that is a huge revelation in this video. As a matter of fact, there are probably a couple people who literally just clicked off of this video right now because I said I like The Last Jedi. I'm not gonna go into why I like it. Again, maybe that's a video coming in the future, I don't know. That's not the question we're trying to pose here today. But I will say, for me personally, I think the first two films are good. They have their flaws, but they're good. Rise of Skywalker, again, I'm not gonna get into it, but let's look at it objectively. People don't like it. People don't like that series. People don't like that trilogy. Okay, so 6 films and only 3 are good. That's not great. That's not a great batting average. All right, but that's not all the Star Wars films, though. We have other Star Wars films out there. 2 more. Rogue One and Solo, a Star Wars story. What do people think of Rogue One? I honestly, this is the hardest one I can really calculate, because I really like Rogue One. I think it's one of the most different Star Wars films that has ever been made. I think it's really different. I think it's dark. I feel like with Rogue One and Solo, there was so much behind the scenes drama. So much behind the scenes drama. There was reshoots in Rogue One. Gareth Edwards, blah, blah, blah. He did this. There was this. There were so many shots in the trailer that weren't in the movie. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, freaking the guys who did 21 Jump Street. What are their names? Oh my God. Phil Lord and Chris Miller. They were doing Solo, and then Ron Howard took over. And there was so much behind the scenes drama nonsense that people went into those films wanting to hate them. Especially Solo. They didn't give these films really the time of day because they just went in there wanting to hate it. And those films are not perfect. But it's okay to not have perfect Star Wars films. Because if you go into a Star Wars film with such unreasonable standards, which many fans do, then you're going to be impossible to please. Let me tell you something. There's no such thing as a perfect movie. People could say that Citizen Kane is the best movie ever made. Guess what? That movie has flaws too. Star Wars, the original Star Wars, that movie has flaws too. Avengers Endgame, that movie's got flaws. There is not a single movie out there that is perfect. There are going to be plot holes, pacing, things are going, special effects, visual effects, acting in certain moments. There are going to be things that are not good in certain films, and it's okay to acknowledge that. And just because it's Star Wars doesn't mean we should judge those tiny flaws more harshly. Because when these movies came out back in the late 70s and 80s, they weren't perfect either. And people were more willing to talk about them. It wasn't until later on when people started to grow up with Star Wars and find that dusty VHS in the basement of these, like, what are these 3 VHS movies? And they popped it in and they were taken to a new world, you know. So because they watched it when they were 6 years old or 5 years old and they grew up loving Star Wars, they think these movies are perfect. And I am one of those kids who grew up, I literally remember having the special edition VHSs in, I don't even know if they were special edition actually. Was that the special edition at that point? I remember having all 3 VHS movies in my basement when I was a child. And I loved those movies, but even I can acknowledge that they're not perfect. There's no such thing. So when it comes to the spin-offs like Rogue One or Solo, I'm glad that now, because I rewatched Solo not too long ago. Rogue One I still have to rewatch. But especially with Solo, I'm glad that I can look at these films now without all the bullshit that's surrounding it. I can finally just watch these films for what they are and enjoy them, instead of, oh my God, did you hear that they fired Phil Lord and Chris Miller and that they were going to do this, but Ron Howard chose to do this? Did you know that Dan Gilroy was the one who actually did Rogue One and Gareth Edwards is blah, 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 blah. Who cares, dude? The film is in front of me. I'm gonna judge the film. I'm not gonna judge the freaking behind-the-scenes drama and say, oh, this film is bad because of the behind-the-scenes drama. I'm not gonna do that. I'm sorry if I'm coming across really passionate about this or angry. I'm not angry at all. I am just saying that that's so weird to me that people, and this is not the first. Rogue One and Solo, not even remotely the first films people have tried to do this to. I can't necessarily remember them off the top of my head, but I remember people tried to do it with World War Z. People try to do it with Men in Black 3. People tried to do it with The Lone Ranger, and yeah, sometimes those films did turn out to be bad, but every once in a while there are these films out there that people, for some reason, will just hone in on due to the behind-the-scenes mistakes or the behind-the-scenes drama, and will just be out for this film. Like, they'll try to just massacre this film before it's out, and I just don't understand that. So I don't really know the objective opinion about Rogue One, but I'm just gonna say it's mixed. More mixed to negative, maybe. So I could be wrong about that one, but you know, I've heard good and bad things about that one. I think that's definitely the most mixed property. Well, hold on a second. I just caught myself there. The most mixed. Rogue One? Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, have you heard of
The Last Jedi?
That is the most divisive film of all time. Oh my god. What am I talking about, dude? It's by the way, it's 1 a.m. right now. But yeah, it's definitely more mixed, I would say. And then Solo is definitely not liked. People don't like Solo, which is a shame because, like I said, I rewatched that recently without all the behind-the-scenes drama, without all the bullshit that came along with that film. It's actually like a really fun movie, guys. It's pretty well done. I like Solo. I actually have a Solo review that I did, you know, when it came out back in like 2017, I think, 2017, 2018. That will also be in the description below. And in that video, I actually address the high standards that Star Wars fans have when it comes to the franchise. And that's actually one of my favorite videos that I've ever done on this channel, is my Solo review. Because I really feel like, and I'm not trying to boast or anything, but I really feel like I really nailed my feelings about, you know, people who put Star Wars on such a pedestal to where they can't enjoy even a good film. If a film is good for Star Wars fans, that's not good enough. Every film has to be a life-changing event, and that's just unrealistic. The first Star Wars was lightning in a bottle, and I feel like nowadays people have been trying to recapture that lightning. Whether it be Disney or whoever, they've been trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle, and it hasn't worked. But I also feel like fans are expecting them to capture that lightning in a bottle. And they say, if you don't capture that lightning in a bottle, the film's not good enough. And you suck, Disney. It's kind of funny to me how when Disney does something bad, they're the first ones who are blamed. Yet when they do something that's good, like The Mandalorian, Disney is never mentioned. You know, it's all, oh, thank you, Jon Favreau, thank you, Dave Filoni, and then that's it. But when something is perceived to be bad, like the sequel trilogy, they're like, oh wow, thanks Disney and Kathleen Kennedy, the ones who killed Star Wars. It's like, Kathleen Kennedy was also in charge of The Mandalorian, guys. She's the head of Lucasfilm. She is a part of that show. And there are many reports that say that the directors do get a lot more freedom and free reign on those movies, okay? Rian Johnson clearly did his own thing for The Last Jedi. The only one, I guarantee you, they interfered, and I'm not going to get into it too far right now, but I guarantee you the only film where they really got involved was Rise of Skywalker. And that's kind of actually come out that that's a fact, because they let Rian Johnson do what he was doing, and then the fan reaction to that movie was so bad that they panicked and tried to do damage control. So that's the only film. But to say that Disney and Kathleen Kennedy didn't allow these directors to do their vision, that's just not true. J.J. Abrams clearly did what he wanted to do with Force Awakens, okay? He basically remade A New Hope with a new paintbrush. But guess what? That's what J.J. Abrams does. J.J. Abrams has done that before. Star Trek Into Darkness is Wrath of Khan. It's just told with a new paintbrush. So that's kind of what J.J. Abrams does. Last Jedi, clearly that's Rian Johnson's movie. 100%. I mean, you cannot argue that Rian Johnson didn't get to do what he wanted to do. Because if you think about it, there's no way that if you really thought that Disney was this giant corporation that was puppeteering the directors like marionettes, that people would go after Rian Johnson the way they do. People attack and go after Rian Johnson because of what he did to The Last Jedi, because he had creative freedom over that film, and those were his decisions. Okay? Because if you really thought that Disney was the one puppeteering everything, you wouldn't go after Rian Johnson. You'd go after the company for puppeteering puppeteering this director and forcing him to do this thing he didn't want to do. But obviously that's not what happened. What happened is Rian Johnson got to do what he wanted to do, and that's why all these people, wrongly so by the way, go after him and harass him to this day, which is awful, by the way. You should not do that, and if you do that, you should be ashamed of yourself. Rise of Skywalker, that's the only one they got involved with. Rogue One, there might have been some discrepancies, but Gareth Edwards has come out, has said, yes, that is like my movie. Gareth Edwards has come out and said that the way he shoots movies is actually very different, and the reason there are a lot of reshoots and a lot of shots in the trailer that weren't in the movie is because the way he shoots his films is almost like, it's something I kind of admire. It's a way that, and I'm quoting an article that I read a few years ago, so forgive me, but he basically says that he goes onto a set, and there's a shot list and all that, but he wants to have freedom. So he goes on and basically just creates things and experiments and does all this stuff. He's like, let's do it this way, but also do it this way. And and if you're a filmmaker, I feel like you can understand this more. He shoots it like a student film, to where you go, get a bunch of shots, and then create a story around that. Like, you'll have a story, obviously, you'll have an outline and a script, but then you'll go out, try all this new stuff, get a couple shots, go into editing and be like, okay, this is what we have so far, and then we gotta go back out and then get the rest of it to try and piece it all together. That's just his filmmaking style. That wasn't, I think people really blew that behind the scenes stuff out of proportion. Now, with Solo, people are like, oh, Disney compromised the vision of Lord and Miller. I don't necessarily think so. I think, and I wasn't there, so I don't know, but guess what? You weren't there either. So this, what I'm about to say, has just been stuff that I've seen in interviews and stuff that I've gleaned from conversations with all those people. The same way you have come to your conclusions, which you don't know are right because you weren't there, I came to the exact same conclusions. And guess what? I don't know if they're right either. But what it seemed like was that Disney did not have a problem with these guys' vision, okay? There is a big process that happens before directors are hired onto projects. I don't know if you guys know this. I am an aspiring director who is trying to get into the film industry. I've devoted my entire life to film. Disney literally doesn't just go knocking on the door and says, hey, do you want to direct this movie? There are pitch meetings. Directors have to make storyboards, keyframe art, concept art out of their own money. They have to make animatics. I remember Scott Derrickson had to fund his own animatics and present those to Marvel before directing Doctor Strange and tell Marvel, this is what I want to do. Taika Waititi made a sizzle reel that was mixed with action films from the 80s with his own comedic tone and presented that to Marvel and said, this is what I want to do. So Phil Lord and Chris Miller had to have presented their vision to Disney, and Disney said it was okay. From what I've gleaned from it, from the behind the scenes stuff, and I don't mean to harp on it, is it seems like they had a bigger problem, not with the director's vision, but with their work ethic. Because I can't remember if it was Alden Ehrenreich or Donald Glover who said this, but someone on the crew said that they filmed, or this might even be an insider scoop, I'm not sure, but they said that literally when Ron Howard came in, the production sped up like 100%. They said that something that took Phil Lord and Chris Miller 3 weeks to shoot, Ron Howard shot in like 3 days. Now again, I don't know if that's true, but I remember reading a quote of someone saying that. So they were behind schedule, they were over budget, that is grounds for firing. My whole point is this, to say that Disney doesn't give the directors creative freedom is not true. People say the same thing about Marvel, and numerous Marvel directors have come out and said they give them tons of freedom. Look at what Chloe Zhao, the director of Eternals, just said about them. Like, she said that they're amazing and they let her do like whatever, you know? It's just sometimes they have creative disagreements and then people like Edgar Wright have to step out. That's just what happens. That's very common in the movie industry. Again, these are just long tangents that I'm doing. You know, I get off topic, I know I do all this stuff, but what am I trying to say is, let's look at the list again. Original trilogy, people love it. Prequel trilogy, people mostly hate it. Sequel trilogy, people really hate it. Spin-offs, mostly people hate it. You have 11 films and only 3 of them are good, objectively. Isn't that grounds for something being overrated? Kind of, right? A lot of people I know, and a lot of people, and you can go, and not everybody, because I've seen a couple outliers in this situation on YouTube, but if you go on YouTube, you can see a lot of times people don't respond to Star Wars when they watch it at a later age. If you don't think your childhood love for Star Wars affects your love for it now, I'm sorry, that's just naive. because it does. The fact that we watched Star Wars as a Star Wars, what? The fact that we watched Star Wars as a kid has a total effect on our love for it. Because one thing I've noticed is that people who watch Star Wars later on in life, like in their 20s or 30s for the first time, believe it or not, there are people who haven't seen Star Wars. I actually know a lot of people who haven't. They typically don't really like it that much. They're like, really? They're like, this is the thing that everyone loves? They're like, it's all right, like it's good, but it's not like that good. And then guess what? They say it's overrated. So, I mean, I don't really know what to take from that, but that's the truth. And not everybody. I mean, you could literally go on YouTube and look up Darth Vader father reaction, and somehow these people have not been spoiled just by our pop culture that Darth Vader is Luke's father. And it freaks them out, and they go like, oh my god, what, it's amazing, and like they're really into it, and like you still see videos of people crying at the end of Star Wars who are adults. But on the flip side of that coin, you see just as many, if not more, people say, like, that's really, like, that's what you love so much? Like, I mean, it's okay, it's a good movie, but it's not that great. You know, especially because, I'm sorry guys, this is just the way it is. Star Wars is a little dated. But that doesn't mean it's bad. But people, when they look upon dated things, I think they have a harder time really falling in love with it. I love Nosferatu. If I show Nosferatu to like one of my friends who isn't this massive film buff, who just likes horror films, they're not gonna respond to that because it's dated. They're gonna be like, I understand it's revolutionary for its time, but man, that was tough to get through. And that's their opinion. So I get it. But at the same time, Nosferatu is a classic, the same way Star Wars is. But I'm just saying, you have to, there's almost a level of time and place when it comes to your love for any movie, but especially Star Wars. Or any movie that's dated. The Wizard of Oz is one of my favorite films of all time. That film's dated. It's revolutionary, it's iconic, and it is years ahead of its time. The same way Star Wars is, and Nosferatu is, and Blade Runner. Although Blade Runner I think holds up better than all those movies. But point is, these films get dated, so if people watch them at an older age, it's gonna be harder for them to respond to it the same way we responded to it when we watched it as a kid. Because when we watch things as children, we have those goggles on where we can't think critically about art and movies. We just can't. I mean, we can like or dislike something, but as a kid, you don't really know why you like or dislike something. I remember when I saw V for Vendetta, I think I was like in middle school, either elementary, it was either late elementary or early middle school, 6th or 7th grade, something like that, where I saw V for Vendetta, and I hated it as a kid. And the only critical reason I could come to why I hated it was because there wasn't enough action. But now, as an adult, I can see how amazing V for Vendetta is because I can see what that movie really is about. That movie involves a lot of critical. I remember in middle school, one of my friends saw Inglourious Bastards and he said he hated it because he didn't like that there were subtitles. When you're a kid, you don't like to watch black and white movies simply because they're black and white. As a kid, we aren't able to think critically when it comes to movies. So if someone presents us with a movie that's dated but is amazing, like Star Wars, I mean, that's just gonna be the most amazing thing we've ever seen. Oh my gosh, that matte painting is so obvious, oh my god. You don't think like that when you're a kid, because that would be dumb. When you're a kid, it's the best thing ever, because Star Wars is amazing. The original movie is amazing, it's iconic. But it's okay to think something is iconic and amazing and think that it's overrated. Here's one of my views about it. Star Wars, when it came out, was the only thing of its kind. Yes, we had Star Trek. Yes, Jaws was the first blockbuster, but Star Wars was the first franchise mega. It was huge. There was nothing else like it. Fast forward 30, 40 years, 50 years, whatever. We're now in a world where Star Wars is not the only fish in the pond. There are many other studios who have franchises that are just as big and arguably maybe even bigger than Star Wars. So we're in this world now where a big budget mega blockbuster movie franchise is just part of the norm. Back in the day, you had Star Wars, and like that was it. And James Bond, but even that was like, eh. Now, you have Star Wars. You have Marvel. You still have James Bond. You had Harry Potter. You had Lord of the Rings. All these franchises, Star Trek still going. All these franchises that, guess what, are just as good, if not better, at the technology, at the special effects, at the storytelling than Star Wars. They're mega franchises, and they make a ton of money. You know, I'm not gonna argue the quality of some of those franchises, but there are franchises out there that make a ton of money and have just as big of a fandom as the Star Wars fandom. To me, Marvel's the new Star Wars. Because like I said, you can't plan for greatness. Star Wars, as a whole, was lightning caught in a bottle. The Star Wars franchise is lightning in a bottle. That first Star Wars film is lightning in a bottle that was casted by Zeus. okay? Like, it's a whole different thing. So you can't plan for something like that to happen again. Marvel didn't plan for that. It has to happen organically. And Marvel is that franchise right now. It spawned organically. They started slow. They had a hit with Iron Man, and it's grown into this massive thing. You don't have to like the movies, the Marvel movies, that's fine. But like I said in the very beginning of this video, let's look at it objectively. People love the Marvel Universe. Almost every film, not all of them, but almost every film has been, like, praised. Even the worst Marvel films have had good reviews. Like, you could say anything you want about Thor the Dark World, or Captain Marvel, or The Incredible Hulk, Ant-Man and the Wasp, but even those movies are not terrible. They haven't had their Cars 2 yet. You know what I'm saying? Knock on wood. I hope they don't. You know, but you might disagree with that statement. That's a more subjective statement that they haven't had their Cars 2 yet. But one thing you can't object to is the massive popularity that Marvel has right now. It's emulating Star Wars because Marvel was lightning in a bottle. And I've talked to a friend semi-recently who said people are actually starting, he's like, you're praising the Marvel films too much. You know, people are actually turning against the Marvel films now. I've seen a lot of people who are calling them formulaic and they're turning against the Marvel films. Avengers Endgame was the biggest film of all time. Avengers Endgame literally is the highest grossing film of all time. Well, I mean, not anymore. Literally, Avatar passed it again a couple days ago, but Avengers Endgame was the highest grossing film of all time. Okay, so people really love this franchise. And I know people are going to hit me with, oh, well, Transformers makes money too, and just because a film makes money doesn't mean it's good. I agree with that. I do. But Transformers, the profit of those films has been dropping substantially from film to film, and a lot of that is international, and they have a very different sensibility. There's a reason that Venom made $800 million, okay? Because 80% of that $800 million came from China, because they have a different sensibility when it comes to films. My point is, though, even domestically, Avengers Endgame was huge. It was critically praised, okay? The Avengers, almost every Marvel movie is either has good press or is praised or is universally praised. I mean, that's just the way it is. You can have your opinions. I have Marvel films that I'm personally not a fan of, and I'm talking about Marvel Studios, obviously. There are Marvel films that I'm not personally a fan of. Like, if I was doing a marathon, there are some that I would probably skip and not really lose sleep over skipping. When you look at all these big franchises, the only thing that comes close to it is Marvel, because the growth of Marvel is organic. And the storytelling of Marvel, to me, is baffling. As a lifelong comic book fan, I'm seeing my childhood dreams. I remember reading Infinity Gauntlet, the storyline, as a kid, and just imagining in my head what it would look like with real people. To actually see that in real life is like almost literally my dreams coming true. I know that's kind of a cheesy statement, but it's true. All right, the people who say that they're tired of Marvel, and this is a whole different discussion, are the people who jumped on the bandwagon when it became popular. But for lifelong comic book fans like me, who can consume this stuff like 24/7, I'm not tired of it. And judging how well these films do, we're 12 years in the Marvel Universe right now, and it shows no signs of slowing down. And even if one film doesn't do like as well, the next one blows everything out of the water. This is high praise for the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it deserves it. Kids today are going to grow up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, viewing it the same way we view Star Wars because we grew up with that. I truly believe that. The kids are gonna grow up, they're gonna find their Blu-ray in that basement of Iron Man, and they're gonna go down this whole rabbit hole of the MCU. Yes, Star Wars was the original GOAT, but it's not the only fish in the pond right now. There are other big budget films that rival it, or in my personal opinion, are actually better than Star Wars. Marvel, to me, has a better track record. If you don't agree with that, that's fine. But yeah, but that doesn't mean I don't love Star Wars, because I do. But I feel like the pedestal it's put on is a little ridiculous. I remember when I was talking to my friend, he said, yeah, Marvel's good or whatever, but the difference between Marvel and Star Wars is that Marvel isn't the one that kicked it all off. But for people in the future, for the kids of today, it is the one that kicked it all off. It's the one, I guarantee you, there are kids out there who watch the Marvel movies and say, oh wow, like their eyes glow and they're taken to another world the same way we were taken to another world when we watched Luke on Tatooine for the first time. And I honestly feel the same way about the sequel trilogy. Wait, hold on, let me rephrase. What I mean by that is the same way that kids view it. The same way kids of the 90s and early 2000s loved the prequels, I guarantee you kids nowadays, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, they've already watched the sequels, guarantee you they love it. You know how many little girls I see trick-or-treating as Rey every Halloween? Those films are already making an impact on the younger generation. The irony is that the millennials who grew up with the prequels have now become the boomers who hated the prequels. Instead of hating the prequels now, they hate the sequels. That's the irony of that whole thing. But we're gonna get to that in the next video. In conclusion, is Star Wars overrated? I don't know. That's for you to decide. I have my answer, and I'm just gonna keep it right here and look at all these films both objectively and subjectively and come to your unbiased conclusion. And it might surprise you. Star Wars might not have been the last film to make this big of an impact on people, but it certainly was the first. And we will never, ever be able to take that away from it, no matter if you like or hate any part of that series. All right, guys, that's pretty much it. This has been a long discussion. I got, I think, 2 more videos planned. I'm gonna head out. It is currently 2 a.m., so I'm gonna get out of here. So anyway, guys, consider subscribing to the channel if you like this. If you were wondering why there is no comments on this video, you can check the first video I did for Star Wars Month where I explained why I'm not enabling comments. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the discussion and it made you think, because that's what I'm trying to do here. It's kind of like a visual podcast in a way, a one-man podcast. Clever catchphrase. I'll see you later. Bye.